Have you gone back to Palestine?
Yeah, I've gone on 3 other trips since then, 3 months at a time each time, working with ISM as well as working with the Christian peacemaker teams.
Yeah, the Christian Peacemaker. Tell us a bit about them.
CBT is a ecumenical organization based in North America that sends teams into conflict zones to do violence de-escalation work. They have a team in Colombia, a team in Palestine that they've had for 10 years. They had a team in Iraq, which I also had the chance to visit in May of 2005. They've had a team on and off up in Canada working with indigenous rights groups up there, and a team on and off on the Arizona-Mexico border doing work with undocumented immigrants that are facing violence from Border Patrol and these, Minutemen vigilante groups. And they've had teams historically. They've had teams in Chiapas and Haiti and the Philippines and Afghanistan, and continue to explore for new places to do nonviolence work.
I mean, I think of them mostly from Hebron and taking all kinds of violence from Jewish settlers.
Yeah, which is where I worked with them in Hebron as well as in this little village in the southern West Bank called Atuani. We started a project there in September of 2005. The little ancient village, 1,000 years old, subsistence agriculture. They could grow all the food and provide the medicine and clothing that they needed to survive, all from within the village. And they lived in these beautiful stone. They live in these beautiful stone and cob houses, and also live in caves. And it's really amazing in village that is
In caves?
and they have caves that they have furnished and use to store food and animals, as well as some people live in them. So it's a very ancient, sustainable way of life where they live very much in harmony with the earth. And Israel has been building these massive settlements all throughout the area, slowly but surely stealing all the land of these little villages. And since they were subsistence, they had a lot of land they needed to grow food to provide for their living. Now it's being stolen and annexed to settlements and put under single ownership, monocrop for-profit factory farming on this land that was before for subsistence agriculture. And the Palestinians are, just forced onto smaller and smaller areas, and many are having to abandon their rural way of life and go into the cities and look for work. And this village is one of many threatened with extinction, that they're trying to completely destroy these people's way of life, which is genocide, to try and target a cultural ethnic identity like the Palestinians, and to try and erase their existence in order to replace them with these new westernized industrial settlements. Is really awful. And so we started a team down there to try and stand with the villagers as they refuse to be evacuated, as they maintain their way of life, and take part in constant nonviolent resistance in order to resist being expelled.
Now, besides Palestine, you've been also to Iraq. You mentioned May of '05. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I thought that it would be good for me to try and expand my experience a little bit, and to see what the other occupation in the Middle East was like, and I thought it would especially expand my work in the U.S. And I very much wanted to stand in solidarity with the Iraqi people, as I had with the Palestinian people, and go and see what it was like and educate Americans about it. So I went over in May of '05, spent a month with the Christian peacemaker teams, living in Baghdad. Also visited Karbala in the south, and had a chance to go up to Fallujah, actually, in the north, and did a lot of writing and meeting with nonviolent anti-occupation activists and Iraqi detainees and former detainees, documenting that situation, and keeping in touch with activists in the U.S. and trying to be in touch with the best ways to resist the war from here.
You mentioned Fallujah. How'd you get into Fallujah?
I had to wait several hours through the U.S. checkpoints. The U.S. and Iraqi government checkpoints can still continue to strangle the city. But after a while, they let us in and went around and met with some different local leaders and saw the incredible destruction, devastated. The U.S. has destroyed about 70% of the cities. Of the city, over half the population, over 100,000 people are homeless because of the U.S. bombardment of the city. So it was a really sad, devastating place, and they're trying to rebuild, but the building supplies and food are all very expensive from the checkpoints that continue to keep such a tight hold on the city.
Is the U.S. pouring money into Fallujah to rebuild it?
Hardly. They, on the contrary, they're only sending in troops. That they send in patrols, Iraqi Shia as well as U.S. patrols to try and continue to crush the resistance that is continuing in Fallujah. The resistance that the U.S. tried to crush has only strengthened, and it's impossible for U.S. to control the city. All they can do is try and strangle it and continue attacking them. But no, they have not put any money into rebuilding or trying to develop at all.
The peace movement generally says bring the troops home from Iraq, bring U.S. troops home. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think that's exactly what we should be saying. Iraqis over 80% support full with U.S. withdrawal, and that doesn't just mean the troops, but all the military bases. There are 12 permanent military bases that the U.S. has built in Iraq, and they all must go. And there will be no peace and stability in Iraq until the foreign occupier has been expelled. And Iraqis are doing everything they can to expel it with a combination of nonviolent and armed resistance. And it's time for us to do much more to try and demand that they be withdrawn. Not only withdrawn, but that then reparations are paid. It's not cut and run, it's cut and write a check. Because we have really done a really awful thing and harmed Iraq quite a bit, and we owe them a lot of money and support. But our troops are only there for U.S. interests and have to be withdrawn.
Well, some people say, yeah, we shouldn't have gone in. It made a tremendous mess, but we have to kind of supervise things until these warring parties can hammer out a political deal.
Yeah, I mean, the best analogy one of my friends uses, he says, if you bring an elephant into a china shop and the elephant starts breaking stuff, you don't say, oh, let me keep the elephant around for a while so he can help fix it. He's only going to continue to break stuff. What you do is you take the elephant out and you write them a check, you say, I'm sorry, and you leave. And that's all that the U.S. can do now. We're only making it worse. We're only playing divide and conquer and furthering civil war. We're only continuing to make more and more Iraqis hate not only us, but also each other and the ones that work with the U.S. And there's nothing good that we can do there. We have to get out.
Let's close by talking about a member of the Christian Peacemaker team, Tom Fox.
Yeah, Tom was a pretty good friend of mine. We had been through CPT training together, and we'd spent time in Palestine together. We'd studied Arabic together in Amman, and he was in Iraq the entire time that I was in Iraq. He was about my parents' age, and he had kids that were about my age, and so we really, thought of him very much as an uncle. Very fun and lighthearted spirit, but also a stern, mature wisdom that was very strong guiding presence for us while in Iraq. And he'd been on the Iraq team for 2 years before he was kidnapped, along with 3 other CPT activists. CPT was the only organization in Iraq with international staff on the ground not under armed protection. We were the only ones living and interacting with Iraqis like other Iraqis, and largely we'd been safe. For 2 years after the kidnapping, we'd been fine. So, but eventually 4 were kidnapped by this unknown armed group who demanded that the U.S. release its hostages. These 17,000 Iraqis that the U.S. is holding with no charges, unfairly. And these militants demanded that they release them. And eventually the 3 of them were released, but not before Tom Fox's body was found in Baghdad. Which was really sad to lose him, yet another friend of mine to die in this struggle. But I understand that this is the situation for hundreds of thousands of Iraqis. The bodies show up every day in Baghdad. The new Lancet study says that they think about 500 Iraqis die every day as a result of the occupation. So this is just really one of many very tragic deaths, and we have to recognize that and stand in solidarity with that.
I understand Tom helped out Palestinians in Iraq who had tried to get out of the country and to the border and so on.
Yeah, the new Iraqi government, this new U.S. puppet Shia government, has been very brutal against anybody who questions its legitimacy at all, as well as against any groups that have traditionally challenged U.S. power. So, of course, they're being very brutal to all Sunnis, and particularly any Sunni political groups, but also groups like Palestinians who historically have resisted, U.S. Imperialism as well as Israeli occupation. And so the new Iraqi U.S. government had been targeting the Palestinians in Iraq and harassing them quite a bit, to the point of where they didn't even even feel safe living in their homes anymore. And a lot of them felt that they needed to flee for their own safety. And so a huge community of Palestinians did a little migration to the border, the Syrian border, to try and get refugee status in Syria. And Syria wouldn't let them in, and so they were stuck on the border in an encampment for about a month and a half on the first time, and about a month the second time. And Tom and CP Tears had gone with them repeatedly and stayed with them out there to try and, provide an international presence and try and negotiate with the Syrians. And eventually they were led into Syria.
Well, thank you very much for this interview, and good luck on the bus.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I've been speaking with Joe Carr, who's an eyewitness to Palestine and to Iraq.